Hi, I'm Anthony and welcome to my channel, South Philly Guitar Machine. This is the first video in a series of video essays that I will be working on in which I attempt to explain my approach to playing with a distinctly Eddie Van Halen edge. This video series was prompted by a viewer who left me a comment asking if I could talk a little bit more about playing like Ed. The red guitar that you saw me holding in the thumbnail is a homemade Frankenstrat guitar that I worked very hard on and I'm very proud of, but it just doesn't sound as good or play as easily as this Wolfgang, so I'll be using the Wolfgang in this video series. If you want to see or hear that red Frankenstrat, just leave me a comment and I'll see what I can do. The format for this video and future videos in this series will be I give you an example of an improvised solo that I've just made up in the style of Van Halen using some Eddie Van Halen techniques. I'll then come back and talk about the different parts of the solo and why I think it works. I'm not going to get into specific music theory or tablature or any kind of specific Van Halen songs or solos, because I think when you're trying to learn from Ed or any artist, it's more important to understand how the building blocks come together than it is to understand the little minute details. So I hope that's clear. Let's jump into the first example. Okay, so in that example, you saw a few things, you heard a few things. I have my little journal here because I had to write down what I actually did in the solo. At this point, it's become kind of intuitive, so I don't really think about it as I'm playing, or it just comes out that way. So I had to write it down. So I started off with a pinched harmonic dive on the 21st fret, and then I went down to another pinched harmonic dive at the 2nd fret. I think this works really well to set you up for what's coming next. It builds some tension so that the listener remains engaged and wants to hear what's coming after. So from there I went to a tremolo pick at the E minor position at the 12th fret to get some energy buildup. I then went into a blues lick, which was not overly complicated. It was maybe 3 or 4 repeated notes. Finally, I was doing some tapping, again in the E minor position, switching over to a blues lick in the E major position. That's one thing that I've noticed, especially in the early years, the early albums, so pre-84. Ed uses the major and minor pentatonic positions frequently, and he switches back and forth. So I do a blues lick in the E major position, and then I do this little chromatic ascending lick from the E major to the E minor, so I'm transferring from the major to the minor position without losing the listener, without jarring the overall feel of the musical piece. But it's also somewhat dissonant because it is chromatic, so I feel that it adds some dynamics to the musical piece. I then do another extended blues lick in the E minor position, and coming close to the end, I do a full bend into a bar dive flutter, similar to what you hear on the Top Jimmy, in Top Jimmy on the Van Halen album 1984. There's a little bar dive flutter in there. I think it's a really cool touch. It's not hard to do at all, but it really makes your solos and your playing sound really like Ed, and it's just a really cool little touch that you don't hear very often. And then finally we close with a full bar dive on the open E to give a sense of finality and make the listener know that the solo is coming to an end. So when I'm thinking about it now, I think what's important is movement. You want to constantly move. That doesn't mean that you want to play as fast as possible. You want to use an analogy from boxing, you want to stick and move. So you want to make your point and then move to the next thing. Make your point, move to the next thing. So, give the listener something in one position and then move to another position and give them something else, and move to another position and give them something else. Is that an efficient way of playing? No, it's not. It's not efficient, but I think for this Eddie Van Halen style, efficiency isn't really the major, it's not a goal. It's all about creating something that's surprising, that has a lot of energy, that has a lot of tension build up, that there's some dissonance, but at the end really works. So don't linger too long, or I try not to linger too long in any position. I try not to repeat things too often. So keep moving. That's the best way I can describe it. Keep moving, and don't sit in one position on the neck. Also, move between techniques. So you want to employ bar dives, harmonics. You want to use tremolo picking. You want to use blues licks. You want to use extreme bends. You want to end on notes that people are not expecting to hear. This all gives the sensation that it's like a train moving forward. It keeps going. It doesn't sit anywhere. It doesn't stagnate. Let's look at the second example. Example, sticking with the same theme as the first example, done in the same key. A lot of similarities there, but I think that's useful because we're talking about we're trying to create an overall snapshot, so it makes sense that they relate to each other closely. So this one's slightly different though. I started off with the tremolo picking again to build the energy and introduce the idea to the listener that something is coming, so pay attention. I then move into a blues lick, which I end on repeated bends, moving to various notes on the same string. I attempted to use the bends to create tension and a little bit of dissonance. Also, it was more of a staccato type of playing to try to break the monotony of speed. You don't want everything to be super fast. You don't want everything to be legato. You want to throw in some staccato in there too, again, because it's surprising, because you want to mix it up. You want to move from technique to technique, ultimately because it's more layered, it's more complex, and I think more interesting. And then go into tapping. And the tapping is again in the E minor pentatonic position. I then do a little chromatic pattern from the G string to the high E and back down again. It's simply just a chromatic pattern. I wasn't thinking about theory at all, but I think because it's situated on the fretboard very close to the E minor position, the listener's ear simply accepts it as okay. But it adds that touch of dissonance that we hear in Ed's playing all the time. Descend down the E minor position at the 12th fret and then further down the neck, finally ending on a D, which again creates that dissonance because it is that 7 note. So it's got just that little bit of, you want it to resolve so that by the time the solo ends, you feel that it's complete. You feel that it is successfully resolved. I hope that's clear. Let's take this video out. Okay, well, I hope this little compilation of 2 samples with some explanation. I try to stay zoomed out without getting into the minutia. I hope that gives you some insight into how I'm approaching playing like Ed. You know, he's a huge influence on me, and honestly, if I hadn't discovered Van Halen, I probably wouldn't be playing electric guitar with the same intensity that I am playing it with. About 10 years ago, I really took a headfirst dive into Van Halen music, and it changed the way I thought about guitar, and I'll never go back. So it's important to me. I really love it. I'm really passionate about it. And if you're watching this video, you probably are as well. So again, I hope this gives you some insight or a snapshot into how I approach playing like Ed. I hope some of the things I've said have been interesting and not too abstract. If you've enjoyed this content, consider leaving a like, subscribing, sharing. If there's something you want me to talk about, something you think that would be helpful or just interesting to hear, just leave me a comment and I'll see what I can do. Look for the next video in this video series in about a week to 10 days, and thanks so much for watching.